Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra,
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people.
associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked.
and sometimes what didn't,
You will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts.
And inspire you to do even greater things.
Before we jump into today's conversation, a special thanks to PM Power Consulting for encouraging and supporting this show right from the start. With over 1,000 person-years of collective experience, PM Power has helped many organizations, teams, and individuals chart out their own journeys of excellence and make progress. Thank you, PM Power. Now, let's move to today's episode.
I'm very excited to welcome all of you into the March month where we are showcasing extremely powerful individuals, right from a climate tech expert to a person who's actually beaten all odds in terms of health and in the technology world. She's a senior director in software. And I am also super excited to share our male ally to share what he thinks about women who are breaking various constraints and various barriers and how he looks at the world very, very differently.
Welcome to this special episode. This is part of the specials that we have every year focusing on women in IT. We normally do it in the month of March. While most of the guests have been women, this time we also have a male to share the male perspective from my colleague Srini from PM Power. In this conversation, Srini shares his experiences and perspectives on empowering women in the workplace, particularly in IT, and some of these situations that he had either handled himself or seen others face, and offers practical tips in terms of how we can make the workplace with more empathy, fairness, and providing structural support in empowering women in the IT industry. Listen on. Hi, Srini. Welcome back to the Software People Stories.
Hey, thanks, Shiv. It's been a great pleasure with you guys all the time, right? I mean, every time it is something fascinating to discuss, and you also obviously pull back old memories, also looking forward. So, looking forward to this session with you.
Likewise, all our conversations, not necessarily for the podcast, have always been very interesting. You bring very thought out and very different perspectives, which are direct and many times very implementable. So I'm looking forward to that. And also, this conversation is probably a little different from the earlier ones, not so much dipping into nostalgia or looking at those kinds of things. As you know, usually the month of March, we've been dedicating it to women in IT particularly. We've had different formats. We've had the women talking about it, but these are not crib sessions. These are about just featuring women. But then what also turned out were some expectations that some of the women had in terms of support in the workplace. So one year we also had couples where the spouses were talking about how they perceive it and so on and so forth. So based on the brief conversation we had, I'd like to capture your thoughts on, call it advice, call it tips, whatever, for men.
Okay.
How can we men make women more empowered, comfortable, whatever? If you have seen something, of course, as usual, any stories or any incidents, anything that was there, looking at what kind of challenge, maybe these are not intentional, but some things that have come to be, right? Which may be some irritants or barriers for women in the workplace. And then we'll take it from there.
Yeah. Very fascinating, right? I mean, as I look back, right? It's very interesting. Okay, there was a small phase in my life, probably where it was an all men's club. right? So let me start with this one, right? So if I'll probably take a step before that, right? I think when you ask me this question, right, it starts off with probably a little bit of my upbringing, right? One or two lines on that.
Mm,
I think I go back to what my dad felt. I mean, he just was a SSLC in those days, if you were to speak,
mm,
right?
mm,
Nothing fanciful by any definition. But one thing he was clear was education was the only wealth I'm going to leave my children with.
mm,
And there was no discrimination between my sister and the two brothers we were,
mm,
right? I don't think he thought of it as setting an agenda for me, but I think somewhere along the line, these things shaped me up.
mm,
One. Second thing is, I think an interesting thing that happened is in that era, a lot of boys' school were there, right?
mm,
But he consciously put us into a co-ed school.
mm,
So I think studying with girls in the school, and those days there was a very clear separation, boys, girls, and things like that.
mm,
But yet, I think growing up in a co-ed school, all of this probably in hindsight, when I look at my life, right,
mm,
have been the early seeds that sowed the way probably when you look at women, right? Because
mm,
thereafter, as I said, I was in an all boys club almost. IIT
mm,
Madras in my era, there
mm,
were three women in my batch out of 254.
mm.
And then Godrej and boys. So the spelling was wrong. I think instead of BOYCE, it should have
Oh, I
been
see.
BOYS, right? So yeah, about 8, 10 years. Having said that, now let me come back to the place where I started interacting with women at workplace after that. Actually, my first manager happens to be the first women leader I had was at a customer site in Switzerland,
Okay.
right? I still remember her name, Zrauka Arnold, right? Very fascinating. Short, I did work for her, but I think in some senses, all of these people played a small role in how I grew up,
Mm,
right? Let me move on to certain things when I, as a manager, started to deal with women, right? My first large experience of dealing with women goes back in the 80s, right?
mm,
So, one thing all of this background led me to do is to think that in my mind, fairness meant every employee is the same, right? Man or woman.
mm,
So, when I got a first time to lead probably a team outside of Godrej, right,
mhm,
which is an all boys company, right? I had a couple of women in my team, more guys. I don't think at any point I discriminated against any of them, right? I just looked at what people were able to do it, work with them, and they worked shoulder to shoulder with me, right? And to that extent, I think I started off in my mind then in the right way, treating women
mm,
as peers.
mhm,
Of course, it was a few years later, maybe that I realized that there is more than what I thought it was, right?
mm,
Well, that might have been a good starting block, but that was, I don't think that was enough of a block. So that was a good starting point for me, right? Treating them as this one. I did not discriminate against women. And even the ladies who were there in my team always felt that there was nothing like, hey, this was a man or a woman, right? Because they knew that they were getting treated fairly well. I mean,
mm,
calling a spade or giving them the reward for what they did. The first time I think I got into something more different than that was when I was part of a startup,
mm,
right? As one of the expat, along with an expat, I was involved in getting this company started,
mhm,
right? And we went for, I mean, we had a challenge. We were a small company in the 90s, right? And the industry was booming. So pretty challenging sometimes to get people. So I interviewed this lady. Yeah, her name was Anjali. What happened was she came in for the interview. The resume looked all fine. Only when she came into the meeting, she said, look, I will tell you guys something. I've been out of the workforce for 7 years and I'm lost.
mhm,
Here I am as a general manager of a company trying to hire, and she's a fairly experienced lady. And 7 years you're out of the workforce. She says, look, all these things you talk of IBM mainframe, I understand, but I don't know I can answer any most of the questions today, right? If I had a
mm,
little time, I can do it. She just threw me completely out of God because I just read the profile, looked senior enough. I said, okay, I'm going to get in. And I did not really anticipate this googly
Mm.
in the thing. But having called her, I said, look, let me see what I can do with it. So had some overall discussion because things seemed to go fine. I told her, give a little time, I'll come back to you. And then I went back, caught up with Satish, who was my boss, and we discussed. I said, this is the problem. He said, what do you want to do? And I said, look, one way I can think of, Satish, we hire her because she seemed to be genuine,
Mm.
but with a clear understanding that we think with her experience she should be somewhere, but we can't place her there. But bring her, quote unquote, undesignated or like a consultant, if you were to speak, but a proper employee, right? No, this one.
Mm.
And let us run through 6 months,
Mm.
at the end of which we can decide how to place her,
Mm.
right? Because it gives her a few months to get reoriented back and try it out.
Mhm.
And this I'm talking of in 96, 97
Okay.
time frame. Luckily, I was lucky. As a manager, he was like, said, go ahead,
Mm.
try it out. Tried it out. Yeah. Because finally the slotting was whether in those days, the designations, if you know, there is something called a project lead and a project manager between the two.
Mm.
And I think eventually she fitted like a project lead in about 6 months' time. First 2 months was a little bit of a
Okay.
struggle. She did it.
Mm.
So I think what this tells me is the first lesson that I learned, and I would like to share with people is sometimes you have to back your intuition and understand that these things were not caused by the person concerned.
Mm.
The reason for her break was she had 2 children. She wanted them to reach a point in time. And I think it is fair because when you take a larger position.
Mm.
So why not give people that freedom to come back? Right? I
Mm.
know today many companies have structured programs and things like that. But still it's a challenge in many other companies where people don't seem to look at it, right?
Mm.
So first suggestion I would have for people learning from this is it can be done. If I could do it in a small unknown company when things were under pressure, I have
Mm.
every reason to believe that today people can do it a lot better.
Mm.
Right? That was the first thing I could share with my experience. I can share another interesting story of mine, right? In my experience, before I stop and then you can take it. This was when I was trying to set up the Chennai center,
Mm.
right? My big boss told me, hey, why don't you go ahead? Since you've done startups and things like that, why don't you go ahead and do this up? So I decided to go and start it up. And inherited a couple of people who were already recruited and all that. But it so happened that as the head of the center, my first cabinet had 5 women managers and 2 men,
No.
right? So in some senses, the joke in the office was the only competitor to use ICICI Kamath because he had a whole range of people who were
Right.
women managers who all became big in their own lives,
Mm.
right? So, and I didn't think like that, but it happened that way and started working with them. Actually, it turned out to be very good in some ways for me as a startup. I think a lot of these people were enthusiastic because they were also getting the center up and were very disciplined about their time, right?
Mm.
Something that I would give them a little more credit. I mean, one can say anecdotal, but that is my experience,
Mhm.
right? Having worked with a range of managers, probably close to 500, 600 managers through my career,
Mm.
right? One thing I could say distinctly different with that was that they were a little more conscious of their time,
Okay.
right? And I'm comparing myself also in the bucket of the guys
Mhm. Mm.
who were generally, I mean, not that were not productive, but not necessarily as conscious of our time. So
Mm.
that's the first thing I picked up from them.
Okay.
And then the next interesting thing happened was that these people, uh, we used to have some meetings, right? And everything was fine, right? And I would be catching with them, and then suddenly I would go back, catch up. But my preferred choice was to go to your desk and meet you, right? Not
Mm.
to get you to my cabin and then have a chat with you, right? Go across to the desk. So many times things will work fine. And there are occasions when I would go in front of the desk and then they'll suddenly look very uncomfortable. I'm having a chat with them.
Okay.
right? And it used to be random, Times it will work, times it will not work. Then finally, I said, this is getting too much. So finally, I called her. I said, look, I'm noticing something like this. Maybe I'm wrong, right? She said, Srini, thanks you asked me this question. Okay. So that means she also felt
Yes.
something about it, right? Because I was hesitant to even put it up, right? Because lest it is misunderstood.
Mm.
Then she told me that, look, Srini, this is the problem. I have no problem with you coming and catching up. I like everything that you're doing with me and all that. The only issue is if you ever walk to my desk at 5:30 in the evening,
Mm.
I can get completely hassled because I want to leave immediately. And the time frame between 6 to 8:30 is my family time. Lots of things at home to take care, right? And anything that delays that causes a lot of concern to me.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I mean, this is something I never thought because as a guy, right? And maybe my own family and a set of other guy managers I've worked with, we probably did not face this in our life.
Yeah.
For good or bad. I'm not going to say anything is right or wrong. I'm just saying we did not face it. So this was an awakening to me, right? Saying, okay, you need to understand that. And then it became obvious to me when I look back in our society, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I'm only a part of the society, right? There is no point in making a holier than thou assumption, right? That's a fair reflection of the way the society probably behaves, of which I'm a specimen too. I said, okay, I got it. And then it became a lot easier, I was conscious anytime I would go to the desk to look at my watch. If it was after 5:20, I would say, oh shit, I made a mistake. Push it to the next morning. Otherwise, I would go. Because she was okay after 8:30 in the night or 9 in the night. And I had a philosophy that I don't want to disturb people at home. So this is my value system. So it wouldn't work. So if I did, I had to flip it to the next morning. Right. So that was the second lesson. I think be aware that sometimes you will find some interesting behaviors or patterns. I mean, I'm talking of women managers. It is possibly because of, if you take a step back and see the societal construct in which we work, right? And I'm not going to say judge the society on this right now. Be respectful of that, and I think you will make it a lot more easier, right? Even if you're right, otherwise 90% of the time, that 5% of the time that you make them feel harassed, I think can leave bitter feelings, right? I probably would have done that if I had not found out then.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that they had otherwise a good opinion of me. Okay, I'll stop with the story. This was interesting because as a corporate, right, you have all this women recruitment drive and all these things, right? And now there are two ways in which I look at myself. There are some things that I have my own personal belief, and then there are certain times I say this is how the corporate wants me to do things, right? And I am a part of the corporate, and sometimes necessary to obey the orders, right? I mean, not that I'm totally misaligned. Sometimes it could be just a partial misalignment or the intent or whatever, but I go ahead with that. That's how I am. So when the company wanted to try, I have always, the fact that I had such a big cabinet and even further subsequent hiring, the center had more number of women managers than men managers till almost a long time, right? Which is very unusual for a long time for a company to have that situation, at least in early 2000. So then we had this women recruitment drive, and they said, obviously, we want to showcase women managers, and I had a fairly good cabinet of women managers, so I had to ask them to be the people to be the ambassadors on that day for the session. And this manager, her name was Deepa. She went ballistic on me.
Yeah.
And she said, Srini, I am here because of my merits. And I don't want anybody to think that they're doing me a service by giving me a quota, a reservation, and desperately trying to get me in. Look, that was not the way I came in, and that is not the way I want anybody to see women. I don't think anything that she said, I disagreed. But At the same time, it was very obvious that the company was very clear it wanted to have a women-only drive.
Mm.
And this was like going back into the headquarters worldwide. So they had to report how much such things that they were doing to bring women in. So then I had a chat with her one-on-one because this happened in the group meeting. And then I had a chat with her and I said,
Mm.
look, all I can do is I respect your viewpoint.
Mm.
To a large extent, I think many of the things you say is what I believe in. But
Mm.
having said that, we all have corporate responsibilities. All I can do is ensure I don't bring you in the middle of this fire.
Yeah.
I won't nominate you as a manager for this drive. I have the other who are not so vociferous about it
Mhm.
and do it. And I completely respect your viewpoint, and that's the viewpoint I carry, right?
Mm.
Yeah, you are here because of your own merits. No quarters given, no quarters taken, right?
Mm.
So that was another interesting thing. And this is a message that I would like to share with my HR colleagues in the industry today. I think we have to be sensitive of how we handle such things, right?
Mm.
And the fact that if we think it's a women's drive, it's a corporate driven thing, and hence we want to do it, right? That means fundamentally, I don't believe or I have a lukewarm belief in women coming in and now because of somebody diktat and I have to finish some quota, I'm doing it.
Mm.
I think that's unfortunate,
Yeah.
right? If I truly believe, I think I should not wait for this. I should make it a part of my regular life and then don't discriminate and do this.
Mhm.
I think that would be a better way of doing it, right?
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
becomes a way of life of making sure that we are always looking at it in a fair way, trying to make it work and not because there is a drive,
Mhm.
right? Yeah. So these are some of the lessons that I learned. I'll pause here because obviously 4 decades, lots of stories, lots of things.
Yeah. This is more in terms of curiosity. So far, mostly the situations have all been about managing women in your team, right? Uh, do any of these things change, or if there is any other things that we need to consider when you're dealing with peers or
Dealing with
peers? I mean, it's not just women team members; it's about women peers. Or when, say, you report to a woman,
okay.
are there some things that okay, men need to be aware of, sensitive of, or whatever?
Okay. So let me start off with reporting to a woman,
Mm.
right? Because I did have a woman manager when I was fairly high up in the organization,
Mhm.
right? If I was high up in the organization, she was even higher,
Mm. Yeah.
right? So, and in some senses, that was the first time when I really had I mean, even though I talk of Dravka, right? That was still a client manager. I was there for a short burst. She didn't have anything. But here was this lady who actually was in a position of true power, and I was reporting to her in all senses, right? And when I got in, I did have some trepidation, right? Because as you said, right, I had never worked like that with a senior woman leader.
Mm.
So what do so a couple of things that initially become a little concern is somehow I think when it is an all boys club,
Mm.
you think you're a little more comfortable sharing certain things about yourself or your personal things.
Mm.
I think with a woman manager, you are a little more circumspect about doing it.
Okay.
Don't ask me why, right? I
Mm.
mean, I can only share my experience.
Mhm.
So it does take a long time before you ever want to bring any topics beyond your immediate professional thing with them,
Mm.
right? Maybe if you had worked with a few of them, maybe it would have been easier, but definitely that was one thing I noticed, right?
Mhm.
A little different from what it was when I was working with a men manager versus a woman
Yeah. Okay.
manager, right? Having said that, I soon realized she was as tough or as receptive as any of the other guys who were
Mm.
above earlier,
Mm. Mm.
right? when I got in, when she gave me an assignment, she said, go get it done. And then when I got the wrong end of the stick, when somebody dumped, unfortunately, a poorly rated manager to report to me because I was new to the company and I had no idea what was happening. And later I had to fire him. She called me and said, Srini, this is part of life. You figure out how you're going to handle this.
Yeah.
No different from any other manager, right? I didn't find any difference whatsoever in the way she handled me. So I think those things slowly gave me comfort then to work with. And then when we had probably the toughest customer to work with, right? And I don't want to name the client. It's a big 5 Indian company, right? In all senses, and a very big manager. So we had to tell him that whatever he was asking for is impossible to be done. And it was impossible, not just for us, but we believe it is impossible for anybody to do what he wants. So once I convinced her, she said, okay, fine, I'll go speak to him. She went and told him on his face, right? Take it or leave it. Yeah, he told us to leave. He said, if you don't do it, I will still launch this service free.
Okay.
He said, it is your prerogative. But she was backing me to the hilt, right? Like I have seen. So I think it takes a little longer to warm up if you have a women leader because you're circumspect about what you can speak early on and whether some things are like jokes. And I think, of course, with all due respect to all of us, right? Sometimes you have to be very careful of certain jokes that you make, right? And I still think, in hindsight, some of the things, like I was working in another company, I had a project on change management, right? That was the product we were developing. And we use some quip, right? Which today appears very unparliamentarian, right? When I look back, the user manual had it.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And it said like something about a woman changes her mind so often. And that's something about change management, right? Now, I think those are the type of things I probably would have avoided or done differently if I had had a women manager, right? Because I would have been a little more observant of these comments, which I didn't do. But other than that, I did not find her to be any more different, right? And that worked fine with her.
But these are very, again, interesting points and the perspectives. But not to stereotype women. Again, since I thought of getting input from you in terms of what could be other tips for other men. Some of the phases that one goes through, like you talked about this person who got back to work after a break, for re-entry, because this is something that probably most men may not have. In the sense, they might have had a small break in career and all that, but they would have been doing something. But this kind of break, and always this challenge of, since that time, it could be this imposter syndrome, where they may feel, even though they are competent, they know that, and they have the confidence, they may say that, oh, I've missed out, and okay, this is not testing, and maybe get into that. So, as a male colleague, whether it is as the supervisor or a peer, core team member, whatever, are there some things that one need to be aware of, one can do?
Okay. Few things. Yeah. The few that I already spoke about. Other than that, right? One thing, I think, very difficult even today. I don't know how to handle this, honestly. Right? Which again, this is all observation of patterns, right? And men don't go through this. This is women going through her menstrual cycle, right? And once you have lived in a family and you have brother, sister, daughter, I think you understand that these patterns are not exactly the same for everybody, right? How people go through. Now, these things suddenly result
Mm.
in women sort of behaving differently at some points of time.
Mhm.
How do we keep ourselves aware that some of these things which we don't experience as guys,
Mm.
and not necessarily every woman may go through it the same way or the same this one, right?
Yeah.
How do I respect that and manage it, right?
Mm. Mm.
I know it is too personal a question. You can't go ask a woman who works for you, or you go to, and that will be devastating. You probably are doing a career limiting move,
Mm.
right? Even the intent is good. But at the same time, these things happen,
Mm.
right? So after some point, you see some pattern, and then you say, okay, maybe just let a couple of days go by, and then you find that
Mm.
things are working out because you suddenly see them
Mm.
stressed out or tired
Mm.
out and things like that. Like, for example, right, that some of these things, observations also let us, for example, the difference when I had an opportunity to build a center is when we build the toilet for women, right? There was also a small, along with that, there's a small place, there is a sofa for them to rest and things like that. It was not there in the guys' room, by the way.
Mhm.
If
Mm.
people had come in to see the guys' side of the world, they wouldn't have seen this. Now, I think just that little awareness that women go through some of these things, right? At different
Mm.
levels, depending on your job content, right? Because at one stage, I was not a real estate guy, but
Yeah.
I still had a responsibility. I was running a center, right? How do you look at small little things to go back to make sure that these things are thought of,
Mm.
right? Which I am not thinking of it as a shortcoming. I'm just thinking of it as how nature created us.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, the problem is the moment in my mind I think I am doing this because they have a handicap,
Mm.
whole thing becomes a problem.
Yeah.
The moment I think that I'm just doing it because nature created us like this,
Mm.
and I'm just respecting that, it becomes a lot easier, right? That is the other thing I can think of, right? The third thing, and this becomes the third thing I'm talking of is now going to be for senior guys,
Mhm.
right? Probably who business heads or somewhere, depending on the size of the organization, if you run thousands of people in the organization,
Mm.
a lot of experience with companies, right? What happens is we run with this whole wonderful concept of utilization
Mhm. Yeah.
in a service organization, right?
Mm.
And it's a very simple formula the organization applies, right? It says so many people in your group, so many
So many.
billable
Yeah.
hours or whatever way in which you want to compute that, and say, hey, this is the threshold, this is what you have met, this is not what you have not met, right? Now, I think for people who design this, and the same set of leaders on top come back and give you two instructions, one more instruction. They are encouraging you get more women in your team. So I have personally gone through this situation myself, where I had an organization where I was close to 45% women,
Mm.
and some of my peers were running at 30 and 25.
Okay.
What this does is it changes the dynamic on utilization.
Mm. Yeah.
Why I'm saying that is, I mean, that could be another topic by itself, but when women go off on maternity breaks, right?
Mm.
Obviously, when they're working time, a woman between 25 to 45, when she is at the peak at the work, is also the time when she can be rearing child.
Yes.
So, which means they are going to happen only in your work time. It cannot be before they come to work, and it cannot be
Mm.
after they have finished working in life. It has to happen during the same period, right? How do you then appreciate and ensure that these utilization factors are
Mm.
appropriately tailored
Yeah.
so that you don't penalize leaders
Mm.
who actually have otherwise agreed to doing the first thing?
Mm.
And that is to increase the amount of women in the team or consciously bring them in, right? Because what happens is subconsciously, otherwise, many men, right, when they start realizing the numbers are going the other way, they want to start flipping the ratio because they just say, look, I'm
Yeah.
getting bombarded with targets. And this is a nice to have feature. It is no longer a respect of the society, but my survival. Don't do it. So that will be a recommendation for the senior guys, right?
Yes.
Please respect this.
Yeah.
The other thing, if I were to say what I would learn, again, this is for the organizational level people, right? And times have changed from my era, right? I'm clearly a generation out, if I were to speak. And I've seen some companies do this. I think if we truly believe that men and women are equal at workplace, beyond maternity, I think paternity should not be a lip service. What I mean is, I've seen some organizations which actually give men like as much as 4 months of paternity leave. And it helps them to care for their child. Because if the wife is working, she has to go back to work, he can come back to manage that and things like that. But if you say paternity is there, but you get a week off, that's not a paternity leave. That's just celebrating paternity. Right? I think this is something that I would think organizations should look at it, right? If we really believe that we respect the fact that this is nature and this is how it works, right? A man is not going to go ahead and reproduce, maybe at least as far as I know till now. Right? But at the end of the day, but he is responsible as much as his wife to bring up the child. Go back and ask yourself, are you going to build systems around this? Right? So some of these are at that level. And for managers, whatever I told earlier, I think are something that I would say be aware. I'll pause here. I don't know whether I answered your question reasonably.
Yes, definitely. Since you also enlarged the scope to the organizational thought process, how we need to do. See, this is something that I've also come across. It's a difficult thing to address. I just wanted to get your perspective on that, which is this peer networking or the peer kinship or whatever you want to call that. What I've noticed is that within a particular silo, the business unit or even a project team, it usually happens. But when there are fewer women, they need to reach out across the organization. And many times, many of our systems are built in such a way that they discourage getting out of your team or your BU, etc. So, any thoughts on that?
Oh, I think what you observed, right? It happens even within the smaller unit itself, right? But I want to go back. There are two parts to this thing. Predecessor events, right? Right? And informal networking. Now, things are changing in the society, but still there is a little difference. If let us say, when we talk of having some free time, going to a party or something like that, especially corporate level ones, with no offense to anybody or no demeaning any organization or anybody, I'm talking of a general position which is happening in 70% of the situations. There is a lot of liquor flowing, times take on and things like that. And women say, look, it's a waste of my time. Right? I'm not saying all men are like that, all women are like that. But in general, right, I'm talking of about 60-70% of the population are like that. So what this one does is, it straight away either creates a handicap for the women or inadvertently creates an advantage for the guys. Right? And one can say, hey, this is only optional, right? I mean, you should feel this is optional. But we all know how optional things also have a role to play in our lives. Right? Nice to have, but when you have a network that helps you, and when you have not network that hurts you. Right? I think organizations need to go back to understand how such conflicts can be recreated. If necessary, taking into account the social construct, taking into account that we have both men and women, and this is the way a large swath of population thinks and behaves,
Mm.
right? Because that's a very important prerequisite if you want to bring things into play, right? To change it.
Mm.
And maybe sometimes some of these teams should be the ones that who organize, drive this, should be maybe headed by women or having some amount of equal amount of men, women, to see whether they can do it. And taking into account that, I mean, as I said, some 30% of them may be acceptable with this. The 70% who are the silent, who are not
Mm.
able to manage this, are we making sure that they have a presence there?
Yeah.
Because otherwise you will still continue, because organizations have done this, right?
Mm.
Party to the story, I have seen things, right? You get people you know who don't mind this,
Mm.
and then say, look, yeah, women are also involved in the decision making.
Yeah.
And that represents one sector of the society, but not the significant spectrum of my women, right? So I think one suggestion to help would be relook at this whole construct, right? There are many ways to do it. Like sometimes we have had cricket matches, we have had certain things. We were even, or sometime when we got the awards, we took people to an IPL instead of actually
Okay.
going ahead and blowing up money in some other way, right? So there are ways in which you can probably try and make it happen. That's one thing. Second thing with women is that how do you understand that, given what I said about the social construct and the timings,
Mm.
right? Now, are the one thing is to say we can stretch goals,
Mm.
right? That's an easy answer, right? I have been a party to the stretch goal story, right? So
Mm.
I wouldn't, but when I look back now, I can say that that's a nice way that you put the onus back on something in which most women don't have a control,
Yeah.
right? Effectively telling them, look, you made that choice,
Mm.
right? So what happens is times beyond the work, right? So times to do certain things. You are not giving them. You are expecting some things when society is still not ready in the way that you want, right? I'm not saying society has not changed. It has
Mm.
changed.
Mm. Mm.
But still, there is an inherently higher load on women at home compared to the men. I'm again talking
Yeah.
predominantly, right?
Yeah.
Don't if people come back and say, hey, from 10% it was now 30% of the women don't have this challenge, maybe true, but still
Mm.
60% of the women probably are going through that.
Mhm.
So don't underestimate that 60% and say, oh, I have done well. I moved from 10 to 30 and 3x I report on my report card.
Yeah.
So these things, I would say, I think we should relook at it, how to make it fair. Because I understand it cannot be 100% fair. But every step that you take such that you're aware and taking decisions, I think you will get a much better decision than what we are doing today, because we are not taking that into fact. That's all.
Mm.
I'm not saying everything will be 100% changed, but
Mhm.
taking a step back could help us to bring back, because as I said, these type of informal networking, getting into it, and expectations that you can work after hours, right? Or weekends sometimes.
Yeah.
If that becomes a norm, I mean, if you're in a startup mode, I can understand, right? Any of us who sign up in that mode, I can understand. If you're in a crunch phase, I can understand, because sometimes.
Mm. Mm.
But if that is a necessary way to prove that I am stepping beyond my job to go up,
Yeah.
then I am effectively creating an inhibitor, because in quote unquote most Indian families, right? I can't say all.
Mm.
It is quite likely the husband and the wife are in the rat race, right? And one has to, both can't be staying in the race, right?
Mhm.
Then one of them giving up invariably more often than not happens to be a woman than a man.
Yeah.
I think the only exception I saw in my whole career,
Mm.
sorry to bring a small example here, was invariably I've seen women coming in and giving a wedding invitation card, and either then or within a few months coming back and saying, I'm quitting.
Mm.
And what happens? Hey, my spouse is in another location,
Listen. Yeah.
or another, my husband is in another location and I'm relocating.
Mm.
Why should I generalize it as spouse? My husband is in another location. There was only once in my career when I got a guy who resigned. And then my manager came back and said, this guy is quitting. I said, why? He said, no, his wife is posted far away. So
Yeah.
he's quitting and he's going there. I mean, it was a sense of a disbelief for me for a minute. I wanted to be sure that I heard it right. And then I said, okay. But that is the exception that proved my rule.
Mhm.
So we are in that society, right? That society probably has changed, but not by like an order such that it has come anywhere close to 50-50.
Yeah. Yeah, that has been, wonderful, Srini. Many of the points, right from, the comfort of treating everybody equal and working with from your co-education school. It starts there as children, and also the empathy. And IT being an industry which attracts people from different backgrounds. And there's also additional things that it brings in, depending on the cultural upbringing and all that. So there is probably, while we say that women, there are a lot of women support groups, etc. Men also have a very, very significant role to play. That is basic empathy and ensuring that talent is able to prosper irrespective of the gender.
Yes.
So
At the
thanks a lot.
same time, recognizing that the variation is because of the way nature created us. And the second thing is, we live in a society, and if society has a certain way of behaving, to change the larger society is going to take time. So I believe places like software engineering, which is probably the tip of the iceberg in terms of whatever we call ourselves to be professional, should take the lead to start showing the change. And not to come back and say somewhere in one rural place people are still not doing it.
Yeah. So on that note, once again, thank you, Srini, for setting the tone for the conversations around women in IT.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I hope we will see that women get treated as equals to men, respecting nature and society.
Yeah.
And not as being done a favor.
True. Okay.
Thanks, Shiv. Great.
Thanks.
As always, it's been wonderful. And your questions are always push me. Like even today, I couldn't answer one of them.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.